Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes to everybody. And at this point, I'd like to point out that this is an Irish event that has started early. Welcome to the launch of Ireland's Great Hunger exhibition, The Seed of the People, 1916 Remembered, which honours the men and women who participated in the Easter Rising and their struggle to seek independence for Ireland. I am Connolly, Director of Ireland's Great Hunger Institute. The exhibition has been curated by myself and my fellow historian, Dr. Michael Chiarappa. And it is the third collaboration with the Arnold Bernhard Library. So I'd like to thank in particular, but not exclusively, Robert Jovan, Sandy O'Hare, and Bob Young. Thank you for your help. In the Institute, Sarah Churchill, and we have two wonderful young students, Markella Damianos, it's not Irish, I can't say it, and Richard Jones, who have been wonderful in helping us. So thank you all. Other people have assisted us, and a warm thank you to you all. Guramaigov. You know who you are, I don't need to mention you. And a particular thank you to people who have loaned us such precious artefacts, particularly Jim Callery of Strokestown House in Ireland. His daughter Carolyn is with us. Todd Allan of New Jersey, and Liam O'Brien of the Film and Media Department, who sadly is not here, I can't see him. But thank you, everybody. Everybody in this room is special, but we have some extra special guests. Cormac O'Malley, who will later say a few words about his father, Ernie O'Malley. Father Oliver Rafferty and his colleagues from Boston College. My dear friend Carolyn Callery, who travelled from County Roscommon on Tuesday, accompanied by a very beautiful 100-year-old document, the Proclamation. More about that later. But I am particularly pleased to welcome the Honourable Chris Murphy, United States Senator from Connecticut. Senator Murphy will now say a few words.
Well, a very few words, mostly of congratulations to Christine and her team for putting this exhibition together. I have been a great fan of this university's commitment to telling the story of Ireland and the exodus of so many Irish families to Connecticut and to the Northeast, and I thank them for adding to this body of work with this really special exhibition. I first read in my early 20s a wonderful book by Peter DeRosa called Rebels about the Rising on my way to Ireland for my second trip there. There, my brother and I spent a good part of a week touring through Dublin and many of the sites that, of course, are now known to all with respect to that seminal event in the history of the Irish people. And, of course, at the end of that book, it finishes with the scene of James Connolly's execution and the famous words that he utters that ultimately were heard around the world. In a state that has such amazing ties to the homeland, a state in which almost 1 out of every 5 of us has some strong Irish heritage, it's these stories that it's such a pity that so few know. So few kids who have last names like mine are growing up understanding. And it's a moment where, we have new reason to celebrate our connection to Ireland. Not only is it the time of the high holidays, but the announcement of new direct flights bringing people from Hartford to Ireland, so you can get there to see all of these amazing sites that contributed to Irish independence, especially those connected to the Rising. And so, in so many ways, this is happening just at the right moment. And so, as as an Irish American, as someone who serves on the Foreign Relations Committee, as someone who has been deeply interested in the history of this particular moment in time, I wanted to just be here first to see the exhibit and to get the chance to see it for myself, and to tell you that every time that Quinnipiac chooses to invest in something of this significance, which I know is not an easy thing to do, with all of the sort of immediate needs of a university like this, all the demands of a robust student population, every time that you make the courageous decision to invest in an exhibit like the Seed of the People, you're making an investment in the best of this state and in the future of our state as well. So congratulations. I really look forward to seeing what you've done. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. That was beautiful. So now I'd like to call on Cormac O'Malley, who his father was Ernie O'Malley, who was around in 1916. And Cormac is going to tell some of the story of his father. Cormac comes from an incredible heritage, not simply because he's from County Mayo, and I might be biased, but his father was a scholar, a statesman. His mother was an artist. Cormac himself is a transatlantic solicitor, a writer, a lecturer, and we are very honoured to have him with us this evening. So, Cormac O'Malley, thank you.
Rather than speak about Ernie O'Malley, I thought I would just say what Ernie O'Malley said. 2 points about 1916. And his role in it, which is fairly minimal. But all of us in this room, on occasion, have been had something to think about which drives us to take action. And the way that he said it, it really is, he was from a sheltered individual drawn from the secure seclusion of Irish life to take responsibility for action. And each of us have responsibility to take action in no matter what field we are in, nor what cause we need to serve. So, 1916 is much broader than the actual fact that we're looking at. So here is the words of Ernie O'Malley from On Another Man's Wound, his memoir written in America. And I should say, in addition to what Christine said, my mother was indeed a Connecticut family, so I'm proud to be here, and more than one reason. Easter Monday, a holiday, was warm. I passed Trinity College. The heavy oaken doors were closed. In O'Connell Street, large groups of people were gathered. From the flagstaff at the top of the General Post Office floated a new flag, a tri-colored one, green, white, and orange. The colors ran out from the mast. "What's it all about?" I asked. "Those boyos, the volunteers. They've seized the post office. It won't take long before they're on the run," laughed someone scornfully. I walked up the street. Behind Nelson's pillar lay dead horses. On the base of the pillar was a white poster. I began to read it with a smile, but my smile ceased as I read the proclamation. The Provisional Government of the Irish Republic to the people of Ireland. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of the destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. I was walking home when I met some boys from Trinity College, arrogantly pro-British. "We're collecting some of our people. We want to defend Trinity. It might be attacked. Will you come along?" "I'm going home. I'll be back. Maybe I'll see you later." As I continued on my way, I met another boy whom I knew. He was jubilant, so he was in favor of the rebels. "Well, I'm going back to Trinity in the evening. I was offered a rifle," I said. "Why Trinity? What's it to you? It's not your university. Remember, you'll have to shoot down Irishmen, your own countrymen. You bear them no hatred. If you go in there, you cannot leave, And mark my words, you'll be sorry afterwards. I thought about what the art student had said to me, and somehow I did not go to Trinity. The GPO had been thoroughly barricaded. Other shops had been looted. I had no feeling for or against, save irritation at those fellows for doing the unexpected, seizing the post office and the other buildings. That night the military proclaimed martial law. I kept a diary. I felt faint stirrings of sympathy as I wrote in my diary. I did not feel now indifferent to the men holding Dublin. The shelling and the noise continued. The people seemed a little cowed. They meant something personal. They made me angry. The men down there were right. That I felt sure of. They had a purpose which I did not share. But no one had a right to Ireland except the Irish. So later on, he meets, within a day, he meets another lad. And he has a gun, a Mauser, he got from his father. And he and my father go off and start shooting from the tops of some roofs. And so, I mean, that's where, in a longer lecture, if I've ever invited to give one, I can talk about the epiphany, which is, how someone is transformed on an occasion. But let me give you some background also as to what was happening. That was the epiphany, in a certain sense, of Ernie O'Malley. But it's interesting in his memoir as he describes how the mood in Dublin changes at this time. And you might remember, if you know, that the initial reaction to the rebellion is one not of pride but of disgust, of causing the British to bomb our city. And so, what is all of this about? The note of resentment softened a little more among the people. I heard expressions of sympathy for those poor devils. Damn it, anyway, they're Irish. They're our own. I felt the same, but I did not know how to help. Later in the day came the news of the surrender in the GPO. 4 days after the surrender, a brief announcement. 3 men had been shot at dawn. Porrick Pierce, Tom Clark, Thomas McDonough. Next day, 4 were executed, and the following day, a Mayo man, Major John McBride. I had felt resentment at the death of the others. Now a strange rage replaced it. I wandered about all day, wondering what could I do to help, cursing under my breath, meeting few I could feel any sympathy with, for my friends were all hostile to the spirit of the rising. Some of them resented the executions. Something strange stirred in the people, something long since buried, a sense of communion with the fighting dead generations, for the dead walked again. Tricolour badges were worn on coats, caps and hats. Songs were whistled and sung. The surge of a rebirth of feeling, of a national spring in the earth, the fierce exultance of song expressing a buried national feeling. Photographs of the executed leaders were in every small shop. Names of the men who had practically unknown 2 weeks before were now on the lips of the hearts of many. Porrick Pierce, Thomas McDonough, Joseph Mary McPlunkett were poets. I reconstructed their work and read their poems. The executions had caused bitter feelings, and the arrests and the strict enforcement of martial law helped to intensify it. The people as a whole had not changed, but the new spirit was working slowly, half afraid, yet determined. Without guidance or direction, moving as if to clarify itself, nebulous, reforming, the strange rebirth took place. It was manifest in flags, badges, songs, speech, all seemingly superfluous signs. It was as if the inarticulate attempted to express itself. in any way or by any method. Later would come organization and cool-headed reason. Now, as the lyrical stage, blood sang and pulsed, a strange love was born that for some would never die, but lying stiff on the hillside or in quicklime against a barrack wall. He was a university student at this time. The university was now changed for me. New associations, new affiliations. We were hammered red hot in the furnace of the spirit, and a spark was bound to fly and disclose us to each other with a word, with a look, with a chance remark.
Thank you, that was very powerful. We have Ernie O'Malley's biography in the exhibition, if you want to see it. We have the first edition of it. So in a few minutes we're going to arrange group tours to see the exhibition. The room is quite small if you've been there, so not everybody can go at one time, but Sarah will get you into groups. But before we do that, I thought I would just go through some of the most important aspects of the exhibition, just very, very briefly. So the Seed of the People, 1916, remembered. Why is it called that? If I can, yes. This is Patrick Pearse, the leader of 1916. He was a barrister, a poet, an educator, and a fervent nationalist. And shortly before he died, he wrote a poem called The Rebel. I am come of the seed of the people that sorrow, who have no treasure but hope, no riches laid up but a memory of an ancient glory. My mother bore me in bondage my mother was born. I am of the blood of serfs. And I think the opening lines of that poem really sum up why people felt compelled to rebellion in Ireland. After centuries, 700 years of being a colony of Britain, people really wanted independence. They tried by constitutional means and failed, and so 1916 was another way to win that independence. So, what happened? As Cormac has explained, the centre of the rising was the General Post Office on what is now O'Connell Street, then Sackville Street in Dublin. Our exhibition is framed by two prints by Walter Paget, and these are contemporary prints. We know they are towards the end of the rising. As you can see, the General Post Office is on fire. Connolly has been wounded. He was wounded on Thursday, and you can see that nurses are looking after him. We know that nurses did a lot more than look after the men during 1916. They were involved in all aspects of the rising, including as snipers. But this is just a wonderful image of the rising, a very, very powerful image, just before the men and women evacuated the General Post Office. The surrender. The rising started on Easter Monday. They surrendered on the Saturday. They asked a woman, Nurse Elizabeth Farrell, would she carry the notice of the surrender to the British Army. She did so, protected only by a white flag. And she went through a torrent of bullets. She got to the British Army, and they said they would only accept it in person from Pearse, and Pearse had to return within 30 minutes. So Nurse Farrell returned through the fire, got Pearse, and brought him back to the British Army. And if you look closely at the image on your left, you will see behind Pearse there are feet and just the trail of a skirt. That is Nurse Farrell. If you look at the first official photograph next to it, you'll see that Nurse Farrell has totally been airbrushed out of the scene and hence out of history. And it's taken almost 100 years for women to be put back into the story of 1916. And in our exhibition, we attempt to do that. Executions. As we know, the executions, retributions quickly followed. General Maxwell was put in charge, and he said that 90 people should be executed, including Countess Markiewicz. That was later reduced to 15 people. And just some of the people executed, you might know: James Connolly, trade unionist, socialist, beloved father of the poor of Dublin. He was wounded during the rising and he couldn't stand up. His leg hadn't been treated, it had gangrene, and so he was tied to a chair to be executed. Grace and Joseph Plunkett, one of the poets we've heard about, he was engaged to Grace Gifford, a cartoonist, and they were allowed to get married in the prison, Kilmainham jail. A few hours after the marriage, he was executed. Thomas MacDonagh, another of the poets of the Rising, and he said very significantly, "The proclamation of the Irish Republic has been adduced in evidence against me as one of the signatories. I adhere to every statement in the proclamation. You think it already a dead and buried letter, but it lives, it lives." 1916 remembered, and again Cormac has referred to this immediately after the Rising, as public opinion turned in favour of the insurgents. A propaganda was being engaged in, and the memory of the Rising, of the Sinn Féin revolt, was being captured for future generations. We don't want him, we've had him. And again, I'm going the wrong way. In our collection, we have the first newspaper published in the wake of the Rising in Dublin, the Weekly Irish Times. And it talks about the executions that Cormac has talked about, but it also refers to James Connolly, who was injured, and says that James Connolly is now being treated in the hospital in Kilmainham jail. We know that he was executed the day before. And again, some of the memorabilia in our exhibition, the postcards that Cormac referred to, and this is a medal, again, in our exhibition from 1941. People who survived that late were given a medal with Cuchulainn, the great hero, Irish hero, on it by the President of Ireland. They were also given a state pension. Of course, the women were refused the pension. And finally, the Proclamation, which is the centrepiece of our exhibit. And unusually, we have two proclamations. One is the Half Proclamation. Not many people realised, but the proclamation was printed in two halves because the Republicans didn't have enough typeface. So they printed the top half, reconstructed the lettering, and then printed the bottom half. They left the bottom half on the printing press in Liberty Hall, and of course, the British Army came in and found the printing press. And they printed off a few copies as souvenirs. And so the Half Proclamation, in fact, is rarer than the full proclamation. And we have one on exhibit at the moment. And the full proclamation, and if you look at the full proclamation, we think there are 40 to 50 still in existence, some in private ownership. You'll notice, because of the strange way in which it was printed, there's a gap after the third paragraph. And on each proclamation, the size of the gap varies, again, because of its strange history. But for me, and Carolyn as well, the opening words of the proclamation are the most inspiring possible. Irish men and Irish women. This is the first revolutionary document ever written in the world that treats women as the equals of men. So it really is an inspirational document. It goes on to talk about the deliberate divisiveness of the British government in terms of dividing Protestants from Catholics, and again promises a new society in which everybody will be equal. Again, a truly inspirational aspiration. And just if you look at the proclamation, it's visually stunning, but if you look closely, and I hope when you visit the exhibit you will, there are some quirks. And again, it's all to do with the lack of typeface. If you look, Irish Republic, the C at the end, that's not really a C. That's an O with a little space inserted. If you look at the O's, they ran out of O's, so they recreated them. E's ran out very quickly, so can you see how all the E's are different? At one point, there's even an E that's backwards. So there are little signs which tell you about the proclamation and its authenticity. The 7 men who signed it knew they had signed their death warrants. Patrick Pearse pleaded that he should be the only person executed, but the British government didn't agree. And as punishment, they executed his brother as well, who was a very junior member of the Rising. So finally, I want to finish with some words of the rebel. And I say to my people's masters, beware. Beware of the thing that is coming. Beware of the risen people, who shall take from ye what ye would not give. Did ye think to conquer the people, or that law is stronger than life, and than men's desire to be free? We will try it out with you, ye that have harried and held, ye that have bullied and bribed, tyrants, hypocrites, liars. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the evening and the exhibit. Thank you.